you've managed to upset lots of people with your alternative viewpoint.
The police don't even have a handle on knife crime over fake watches. They're not going to protect me.
You've just come back from Israel and you was on the front line and that you felt safer there than you do in London.
I know last year they tried to cancel him over a Holocaust joke. Said, oh, they cancelled you. He goes, no, they fucking didn't. October 7, they certainly dropped the ball, and I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. Clearly high on drugs, rather than eating a pork sandwich in front of them.
Have you ate a pork sandwich?
My rabbi won't see
No.
this.
If the rabbi's watching, ignore this part. What caused the banning then?
I posted a photo with Tommy, like Andrew Tate, converting to Islam. Converted to Islam when it got cancelled because it was a perfect bet for him. Well, he pushed my mic away and then he went back inside, and one of our guys happened to be inside and had a mic on him and caught him literally threatening to bash me.
You know, on Valentine's Day, Joe Rogan.
You know you've made it when Joe Rogan's talking about you. I just propped up 2 iPhones. I thought I'm just going to get my own copy of this entire interview.
Welcome back to season 3 of the Criminal Connection podcast. I want to say a massive thank you to all our season 3 sponsors. We love you. Big thanks to our sponsor, IME. This global tech outfit ain't messing about. They've got these slick video interviews that have you connecting like there's no tomorrow. Whether you're running a business, running the streets, or doing your own thing. Perfect for those in marketing, recruitment, admissions, and even for auditions. And their platform, smooth as silk, designed with you lot in mind. IME's the ticket to making those connections count. A big thanks to Wildcrest Events for sponsoring the show. From adrenaline pumping sporting events to chart topping sensations, Wildcrest Events have them all. Make sure you drop them a line down below. And if you put in CCP5 off, you will get a 5% discount. Now that's a proper good deal. I want to say a massive shout out to our sponsors, VIP Security Services. VIP Security Services have been running for 35 years. They offer security solutions for our Essex, London, and all the home counties. VIP Security Services will protect you, your home, and your business. Prevention is always better than cure, and you're in safe hands with VIP Security Services. So if you'd like to find out about any of our fabulous sponsors, make sure you check out the links in the description below.
Welcome back to the Criminal Connection podcast. My name's Terry Stone, aka the Podfather. Today, we have a special guest who's flown in from Australia, from down under. He's called the Ozraeli. Please welcome Avi Yemini.
There you go, mate.
Good to have you on, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, you know, I've been watching your stuff online for a while now, and
that explains the Criminal Connection.
And I absolutely love the fact that, you know, whatever happens in the world, you seem to be there and obviously looking into it and obviously offering an alternative narrative. And I think with all this stuff with fake news, with all the stuff that's, you know, what's going on in the world. And I think really when COVID happened, I think a lot of people did start questioning everything and then started looking for alternative viewpoints. And obviously you've managed to upset lots of people with your alternative viewpoints. But what I think a lot of my viewers would be interested in and listeners would be to really find out about the real Avi, you know, where you were born, where you grew up.
Yeah, my story's wild, actually. Like, I'm one of 17 kids. Wow. I'm number 10. I was born the night my family moved to Melbourne, Australia. So my mum is Yemen Israeli. So her family escaped Yemen when Israel was reestablished in 1948. They had to escape Yemen because they were persecuted as Jews most Arab Jews had to escape and head to Israel just for their safety. My dad, he was born in Australia to Russian, Polish parents who escaped the Nazis. In fact, my grandfather's diploma from uni has the sticker on it because in Poland at that time, it was just towards the beginning of it. Wow. He saw what was coming, saw the writing on the wall. He escaped to Australia, met my grandmother, and my dad grew up there as a secular. My mum was ultra-Orthodox, my dad was secular. Then my dad rebelled and became religious, and it was an arranged marriage. 17 kids later, they had
They must have had a connection.
They had 3 dates.
Wow.
3 dates. 8 kids in Israel. Moved to Australia, I think, probably for the easier life.
Right.
My sister was born in Sydney. They drove in a van in a shitbox, a 9-seater shitbox with 11 people in it for 12 hours. Back then it took about 12 hours to drive from Sydney to Melbourne. And I was born that night. I'm still trying to figure out who the hell has that many kids. And then don't plan the birth around a move from capital city to capital city with that many kids in the car, illegally packed. But I was born that night, and I guess I've been attention seeking ever since.
I mean, this could be a warning for those listening and watching at home. If you have an arranged marriage, you could have 17 kids. I mean, I've got 4. And I find whenever you do anything, it's a massive effort moving around. So I mean, you must have had to have a minibus.
We did. Our car, our family car, was a minibus. It was a 17-seater bus. I remember getting dropped off at parties in a bus.
Wow.
And it was just normal. Like, our community had big families, although ours was the largest in Australia from the same 2 parents. 20 years. So by age, I'm the middle. I'm 38. My oldest sister is 48. My younger sister is 28, and that's like when people ask me how old's whatever number, okay. I kind of work it out based on that. Yeah. But I have 4 too, and I had the snip.
And what you didn't want to try and outdo your mum and dad?
I'll let them have that win.
Right, okay. Yeah. And then what was the reason for your family moving from Israel to Melbourne? Was it just because they wanted a better life, or did they like Australia, or was there another reason?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm imagining life is much easier, much easier to raise a family in Australia than it is in Israel for work. And, Israel has the lowest, and I think it has for many years in kind of Western civilization, they have the lowest unemployment, but one of the highest cost of living. And it's been like that. I think the rest of the world is kind of catching up now post-COVID, but they've lived like that forever. Everyone has a job or 2 jobs or 3 jobs, but everyone's living barely from paycheck to paycheck. And I think my parents, or at least my dad, who was the breadwinner, thought, let's do it in Australia, and it would have been a much easier life. The kind of house my parents, when they moved to Melbourne, they built, so it was a tiny little, they bought this little 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom little tiny house that they were going to extend. And, they had 8 kids. It was like 5 kids in each room. And then they had their room, and then they had to put in planning permits for 11 bedrooms and 5 kitchens, because they're kosher. So you can't have milk and meat together. So they have milk, meat, and then you have what's called parve, which is neither meat or milk, so that you can eat it with either meat or milk. And then you have Passover. You have 1 week where you can't have any bread. So they have a separate milk and meat kitchen. So they got rejected on the planning permit because the council thought they were building a brothel. And I just said to my dad, I don't know what brothels you've been to, but I don't know which brothel feeds you that well. Yeah.
And caters for all those people, Yeah,
caters.
It'd probably be the only kosher brothel in Melbourne. Yeah. And then obviously growing up as a kid I've never been to Australia. I've always wanted to go. There's been a lot of movies that I've produced or been in that have been released in Australia, and everyone tells me it's one of the best places in the world. With the beaches, with the food, with the people. But I've never been. But growing up as a kid, what was your experiences growing up?
Australia's a cool place. It's losing its way a bit like London. I refer to London as Londonistan now. Like, I don't recognise it. I swear to God, I every time I come here, it seems like more and more foreign to me, because I arrived at the airport. The first white person I met was my cabbie. And I just think it feels like England has, or at least London's been replaced, which in itself wouldn't be a bad thing if there was preserved culture, but I feel like the culture has changed as well. And you just see that in the marches in the last few weeks, right, where the city's been overrun by Middle Eastern extremism. Like it's a kind of scary place for me as a Jew, as a Jew with a profile. I'm like, oh. And Australia, especially Melbourne, it's kind of behind London in that way. So it was the coolest place to live. It was great growing up. You know, the crazy left have always gone on about intolerance, and I grew up as a brown person in Melbourne, and most people are cool. I don't think there was ever a problem. I feel more racism now there than I did back then, let's say, when it was a whiter society.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just because people are being told that they're racist, or what
No,
do you think?
I actually think that, and you could probably, it's probably similar here. I think that, so white people are told they're racist all the time by other, generally uni students with blue hair and bushy armpits. But the thing is, ethnic cultures are generally, if you ever hang out in an ethnic home, they're usually they're straight up racist between each other, because that's just like how they are. No one tells them that they're being racist. They can kind of get away with it just in a natural environment. Hang out in any ethnic family, and the kind of unaccepted racism that as a society in the West we've learnt to naturally progression have decided, oh, that's not, you don't talk about other people's culture like that. But in ethnic communities, it's actually like that. And that's why so many feel comfortable on the streets calling for the annihilation of a particular minority that's smaller than them, because they get excused for their racism. And I think as we've brought in more cultures, ethnic cultures into the West, whether it's in Australia or here, you see that real racism has grown. And that's what I feel is the real racism that I'm actually scared of, that has grown, whereas the so-called, the boogeyman racism that we were told for so many years that white people, should have white guilt for everything they've done. I don't know, most white people were cool to me as a kid.
Well, it's weird. Like when I grew up, I grew up on a council estate, council property, no money. my mum and dad worked 9 to 5
Sounds
jobs.
like real white privilege you had.
But that's what I was going to get to. And everything that I've achieved or everything that we made, we had to go and get. And growing up in the 70s, I'm a little bit older than you, but growing up in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of different cultures in England. So if there was someone from a different culture at your school, whether they were Chinese, whether they were African, whether they were, even if they were American, even if they didn't live in England, right? It was like everybody was fair game. So obviously if you was different, people would, and I remember there was a kid that I was really good friends with who was Indian, and people obviously was calling him and all this sort of stuff, and he'd get really upset about it. And obviously in the 70s, because when you're growing up, you hear that term, and because no one educates you and said, India's there, Pakistan is there, if you're from there, they hate those people. If you're from there, you hate those people. Nobody actually explained that. So people would use that term, because that's what, because they were ignorant, right?
Yeah.
But if you actually fast forward from the 70s to today, right, obviously all that's gone now, right?
Yeah.
And people aren't ignorant. So I sort of feel like people want to sort of complain about the stuff that was happening in the 70s, but make it like it's happening now.
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't know if you watch a lot of British television or American television or probably Australian television, but a lot of the programs, there was always, some of the things that people would say, right? You'd watch it and you'd be like, now you'd be like, I can't believe that guy's saying that. And you can still find it on the internet. And now if you
just count how many times they did blackface on TV back then.
No, but there was a black and white minstrel show, right? And that was, and people would be laughing at it. And I remember when I first saw that, I did think this is like, not if I was black and I saw that, I would be offended by that.
Yeah.
So it always didn't sit comfortably with me, that particular show. But then it's that thing where everyone laughs at it. And I think with comedy, if people say, here's a joke about some Jewish guys, or here's a joke about whatever, some Irish guys, people sort of laugh about it, and then it becomes, oh, that's funny. It's acceptable to laugh at those people for whatever reason. But I think one of the problems that I find with society today, and this is throughout the world, is it's like no one's allowed to have a sense of humour.
Yeah.
No one can have a banter anymore. And like you said, if you go into, an ethnic household, they will have the banter with you like nobody. You know what I mean? They'll be saying whatever. And you sort of look at that and you sort of think, these people, aren't sort of playing that card that they feel like they haven't got opportunities. I mean, there's so many opportunities now. I think if anything, I think that the West has opened up to everybody and has actually said to ethnic minorities and also people that are from smaller communities, we're going to give you a platform. We're going to allow you to achieve. We're going to give you opportunities. So when you read that they're not getting opportunities and that they're being oppressed or whatever, I do find that odd because I employ people, I work with people. We've always been, we've always employed people. It doesn't matter where they're from or what religion they practice. For me, if they're good at their job, they're getting the job.
Yeah. It's funny because yesterday I bumped into Jimmy Carr.
Right.
Jimmy Carr, who's...
He tells some outrageous jokes, but
he's
a funny
hilarious.
Guy.
And so it was funny because I was at this conference yesterday and I thought, oh, wow, he's here, all right. And I walk up to him and go, hey, Jimmy, massive fan. Can I ask you a couple of questions? He goes, I'm not doing any interviews. And he and the best thing is he rejected me in a way that I've never been rejected before. It was amazing. He goes, where are you from? I go, Rebel News. He goes, well, it sounds like a thing, just not a thing for me. And I thought, oh, what a legend. And then I went and quickly gave the mic off to my cameraman and I thought, I'm going to run up to him and just have a quick chat to him because I said to him, Jimmy, like, I know you probably thought that I was just breaking the ice and I'm actually a fan of yours. I think it's great. Don't have to do an interview, but I just wanted to tell you what my angle was actually going to be here. And what I wanted to tell him, because I know last year they tried to cancel him over a Holocaust joke, which was pretty spicy, but it was...
I remember that. Yeah.
And the organisation that tried to cancel him is called Hope Not Hate, right? And, you read the headlines and it looked like they successfully cancelled him. When I said, they cancelled you, he goes, no, they fucking didn't. He goes, they tried to fucking cancel me. And I go, oh, well, yeah. Anyways, the point was, they tried to cancel him for a Holocaust joke that as a Jew, look, I think maybe ask a gypsy because I think it was probably more offensive to gypsies than it was to Jews.
No, a lot of the travelling community here were upset about that as well.
Yeah,
they come out and say, look, this isn't just about the Holocaust, it's about us and we don't like this, So there was
it was a joke about them. It was a joke at their expense. But personally, I feel like even if it was about Jews, I think intention matters and comedy, like a comedian that's not actually a racist, I don't think he has a racist bone in his body. I just think he's like dark humor and we can laugh at anything. But the point was that the organization that spearheaded the cancellation of Jimmy from Netflix, in the last 3 weeks, they haven't said a word about actual hundreds of thousands marching on the streets here, calling for the annihilation of the Jews. And I'm thinking, that's a bit bizarre to me. And Jimmy went into this massive rant to me, which was unbelievable. And I really wish we were able to film it because I think he was on point. He was making the point as to he's so against racism and he hates people that truly hate. And isn't it ironic that those that tried to cancel him for a joke, whether you like the joke or not, won't actually stand up against real hate and racism when it's about today.
I mean, do you know something? It's what's happening obviously in Israel at the moment is obviously, there is no sort of happy ending, I think. And I think on both sides, when innocent people are killed, when there's war, for me, I just look at the world and I just think if everybody in the world, regardless of what colour, what religion you are, if everybody just sat around the table and said, look, guys, let's not have any more wars. Let's all just get on, right, and make the world a better place. I know that might sound a little bit like touchy-feely and, but for me, that's my ideal world. And I don't know how we ever get to that. But for me, it sort of seems that as soon as you start being progressive and things start happening for the greater good, somebody decides, well, actually, we don't like you anymore. And then there's a war with you. And then, and it's always, for me, like about dividing people, getting people against each other rather than saying, I mean, there's nothing positive about people dying in war. Do you know what I mean? So I've always wanted personally, everyone just to get along, earn a living and have fun.
I think most average people just want to live their life, work hard, earn money, feed their family, live as happy as can be. But in reality, the problem is we have evil forces in the world and they're everywhere. So the current state of Israel, it's the conflict there. You have terrorist organization, a bit like I'm sorry to predict it, probably going to predict it here, but you're going to have attacks again here in London coming up. And I guess, one way to deal with it is try hug it out and tell those extremists, oh, we love you, come and sit at the table. Let's all let's just be friends. And in reality, that probably won't end up very good for.
I don't think hugging it out is I'm not into that hugging people and world peace and
So
I'm not on about the fluffy stuff. What I'm on about is for whatever reason, right? Wherever there's conflict, there's always going to be a resolution. And for me, if you're in business, right? If we're doing a business deal together and there's an issue, we can sit around the table and say, what's the problem? And you can go, well, look, these are my issues. This is what I want sorted. And I'll go, well, these are my issues. And normally you meet in the middle, you shake hands and then you move on.
The only problem with that in this and as well when it comes to terrorism in the UK is that, in business, we both have something we can benefit from. But let's say that my position, all I want is for you to be dead. I don't know if we can compromise on that because can we half kill you?
There is no solution.
We'll just get rid of your head. So that becomes the issue here. And I think when you look at Palestine and Palestinians and Israelis, maybe there is something there certainly should be something to deal with when it comes to the Palestinian people and the Israeli people, because I hope that the average on both sides wants, I don't know most of the average on the Palestinian side. I know I can speak to most of the Israelis. I would say they certainly would be happy to come to a compromise to live for peace. In fact, the Gaza Strip, which is right now the headlines, that they gave that back for peace. It's not occupied anymore. Most viewers probably don't know that. That was given back in 2005. So making compromise for peace with the Palestinian people has been, but you can't sit at a table and compromise with an organization like Hamas, which says in their charter, their whole aim is to annihilate the other side, because where is the compromise? Like, just kill half the Jews, or?
I mean, do you think? I mean, with when you actually look at somewhere like Dubai, right? You go to Dubai and there's very clear rules, right? You can't do this, you can't do that. If you do steer off the track, I mean, you don't see any people, any homeless people in Dubai. You don't see anybody. You don't see any illegal immigrants turn up on the beach in Dubai. You don't see people stealing watches or mugging people or breaking into people's houses in Dubai, and that's because there's firm rules. And I think the only way, and this might, some people might not agree with me, but I think the only way that you can ever have that sort of peace is if the rules are generic. So if they just won't tolerate certain things, and it doesn't matter what religion you are, what race it doesn't matter, right? That's not tolerated. So you can't have people on the streets wanting to eradicate anybody, right? So there's, hate speech is banned, right, on all sides, right? And then if that actually,
I'd be careful when we talk about hate speech, because it's thrown around a lot. I don't mind. I don't care if people hate me. I don't care if they even vocalize their hate. I think the line has to be incitement to violence. So when you talk about eradicating a people, it's about that's inciting people to kill. So that's my problem.
So it's the level of hate speech. If it's extreme, then you should be allowed to protest, but it has to be peaceful. But it can't cross a certain line. And if it crosses
the line needs to be where it's inciting violence. Like you can say, because so much of it is subjective. Like, some of the hate speech laws that you see in the UK, it's so subjective. You could say something that is offensive to me. Like you said, you watched some TV shows and you thought, if I was a black person, I'd probably find that offensive. It's very subjective. And I think offense is taken more than it's given. So I'm not going to lie. There's so much stuff, especially now online, that I see that is super offensive to me. Do I think it should be taken offline? Like, do I think they should be banned? No. Even though I think I'm outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1, I don't think it should be banned. I think as soon as they incite violence, that's where they should not necessarily be banned offline. I think they should face the consequences within the legal system of wherever they are.
But that's what I was getting to with the rules. You know, if there's rules, and as long as you fit in that lane.
Look, I think Dubai, I love visiting Dubai, and they have their way of doing things. And ironically, as a Jew, it's probably one of the safest places on the planet right now, which is crazy for me to think. And that is 100% because of Trump's Abraham Accords. You know, there's not many places I can walk around with this tattoo, especially in the Middle East, and let alone feel safe. But in Dubai, not only feel safe, but also respected and almost, they love you for it. So Dubai certainly has things working for it. But on the other side of it, would I want, for example, Australia to become an authoritarian state where there's certain rules? You know, I love visiting Dubai, but I'm probably much more progressive at heart. So would I want to live in a state where some of those really defined rules they have in Dubai? Probably not. But I love visiting there and I love the state, and I think UAE is... And you also got to remember, it's the Middle East, you know, and I think...
But before we did this interview earlier, though, you said to me, you've just come back from Israel.
Yeah.
And you was on the front line.
Yeah.
And that you felt safer there than you do in London.
So I'll tell you why.
And that is exactly
what you're talking about.
My point.
Yeah.
Because I've grown up, in England, in London. You know, I was putting on dance music parties. You know, we had all sorts of things going on, right? But the thing is, there was always, you could get in your car, you could drive down the road. You know, if somebody mugged you, it'd be like a weird occurrence. If you was walking around and you had a nice watch on, or you had a nice designer bag, you could probably walk around and not have any problems, right? Now people are cutting them off. They're cutting the watches off. They're not even asking for the watches. They're either stabbing you or just going like that and then running off with your watch. Yeah. A guy recently in the city had a fake Patek Philippe watch on in a one-runner city. And the city is probably the most surveilled place in England. And the doorman saw him come in, saw the watch, phoned his mate come in, stabbed the geezer to death for a fake watch, right? That's what's going on here. And you sort of think, oh my God, how is this happening in this country that I love, right? And that's probably, if you've spoken to anybody who's aware of, the amount of crimes that are happening, and that, a lot of people give the police a hard time here saying, oh, they're not doing their job, they're not doing it. But the thing is, there's so many crimes, right? If you've only got so many people in the police force, you can't solve all these crimes. So something needs to happen where the government needs to say, what we're doing isn't working. I mean, they managed to do it in New York. In New York, there was a massive issue of organised crime, homeless people getting burgled, people getting shot dead in the street. And it was just like, it was just like the Wild West in New York. And then the guy coming and said, right, we can't have this anymore. We've got to crack down on it and we've got to start at the bottom. So you do any misdemeanor, you're going to get in trouble. It's not
that was Mayor Giuliani, and he introduced the zero tolerance. And, there was plenty of backlash for that. I think since then it's gone backwards.
Oh no, I think the issue it's like, that fixed it. And New York, you could walk around there at 3 a.m, you'd never have a problem.
But you could, and now it's gone backwards the other way because again, the left, and you see that in London, when cops are so focused on, all these woke marches and dancing at pride parades instead of actually dealing with the, the knife crime in town, then obviously you have a problem. So yeah, I can understand where people give police a hard time. Now, when I mentioned to you that I felt safer in Israel, then it's not because Israel's authoritarian. It was more because, so I was just at the front line in Sderot where they were literally 600 meters from the border. They were firing mortars in my direction. There was one night we had to literally run to a bomb shelter for 50 rockets at our point, just because it was a military point close by. And the reason why I felt safer there is because October 7, they certainly dropped the ball, and I think Tom will tell what actually went down on that day. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, but for Israelis across the board, doesn't matter what side of politics you sit. Most people say those answers, the first thing that matters is winning the war, because if we don't win the war, our existence, we may not be here to get those answers, so the answers don't matter. But after October 7, once the army regained control and kicked back into thing, when I'm there on the front line, it became, okay, they're firing mortars at me or whatever, and they're shooting in that direction, but at least there's an army there. There's an iron dome, there's bomb shelters, there's an entire system that's set up to defend the people. When I come to London, as a Jew now, when I see what's been happening and all the Jews being targeted, and the fact that it's become somehow okay to call for the annihilation of my people, yet the police are going to people's houses to arrest them for removing Palestinian flags or whatever. And so I come here and I think, gosh, if I walk down the street, the police don't even have a handle on knife crime over fake watches. They're not going to protect me. There's no one here to protect me. Whereas in Israel, at least there is a system that's going to at least try to protect me. I have no faith in the British police, in the Met Police here. And I know I'm not alone, because I've spoken to several people within the Jewish community who are actually thinking of moving from the UK to the war zone because it's safer. So let that sink in.
I think the problem that the police face as well is when they go to, one of these crimes now, their lives are in danger, and 100%. They're not getting paid enough money to put. If someone said to you,
do they carry guns here even?
No, okay. They should do. Right, that's my opinion. Right, because at that point, right, people, if you're a police officer and you've got a pair of handcuffs and some CS gas and a baton, and you're going to arrest someone and they're going to pull a knife out on you, or they might pull a gun out on you, it's gone to that extreme now. I mean, a friend of mine is a Krav Maga instructor. He actually trains the Met and he's had to go back in and retrain them again to work, because they've now worked out they're wearing these stab-proof, bulletproof vests to stab them in the armpits to kill them, right? So if you was a police officer on 25, 30 grand a year and you're getting called back to do some armed combat training, and they're saying, oh, these people are going to try and stab you on the armpits to kill you. If it was me, I'd be going, do you know what? I've really enjoyed my time in the Met, but I'm off. I'm going to go and work at the post office. So I don't blame them. And the thing is, but this is what I'm saying. With the reason I'm a fan of the zero tolerance thing is because I think it's the only answer, because it's getting like the Wild West.
100%. I think zero tolerance. I was a fan of that. I think zero tolerance. I can't remember. Was it 3 strikes and you're? I think it was 3 strikes, depend on. Anyways, it was very effective in New York. It turned New York, because I'd been there before the zero tolerance and after, and it was completely different place.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously we've talked a little bit about current affairs, but what I really wanted to find out, obviously, we was talking about your childhood, and obviously growing up in Melbourne, and what I wanted to know was, like, when you was at school, was you academic? Did you?
No, I was a little shit.
You was a rebel.
I was well. I lasted. So we were ultra Orthodox family. I went to a religious school until about I think year 8. I got expelled, and I got kicked out of home at about 14, and I lived on the street, and I ended up being from the age of 15 to 17. I was a junkie on heroin.
Wow.
And I had I was in and out of the court system, and it didn't look like I was going to.
Did you do actually any jail time?
No, I didn't. It was interesting because, I criticize the system now, because I did. I remember back then, even back then, I pulled the race card so often, and it got me off. But I don't think I wasn't a bad kid. I was just. I think my moral compass was kind of warped, just for the fact that I grew up believing that breaking the Sabbath was probably, or eating pork was worse than armed robbery.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? Because, or taking drugs. Definitely taking drugs. I felt comfortable going back to my house, like my community, high on drugs, clearly high on drugs, rather than eating a pork sandwich in front of them.
Have you had a pork sandwich?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I'm not a pork fan. I like bacon.
Right, okay.
This is not, my rabbi can't watch this, yeah.
Pardon?
My rabbi won't see
No,
this.
no. If the rabbi's watching, ignore this part. But you know, I mean, what kind of got you into drug? Because obviously, you know, you've grown up in this amazing place. You know, there's sunshine, there's beaches. What was it? Just somebody offered it to you, or did you actually seek it out because you was going through that sort of rebellious stage when you was?
It's a long story, and I'll be cheeky and I'll plug the book. You're gonna Rebel from the Start. You can read like from my whole story in my words.
It's fascinating. That's what, you know. Yeah.
And so so like I said a second ago, there's a warped moral compass. When I left home, so I was given the ultimatum from my dad, basically. If you want to stay in our house, you've got to abide by our strict religious rules. His justification at the time was, well, if you stay at our house and you're not keeping any of the rules, all your little siblings are going to see what you're doing and they're going to look up to you because you're the cool, crazy one, and they're going to want to follow suit. As a parent, I'm very close with my whole family now, and I think family is the most important thing to anyone. It should be, with all the problems I had in my own family. But I look at the way my dad handled that back then, and I couldn't imagine doing it. Like I couldn't imagine turning to my kids, and my kids are the age that I got kicked out of, and I think, geez, like they wouldn't survive a day on the street, and I could not put them through that. But I was given that ultimatum, and I said, "Oh, I'll piss off on I'll go. And I went straight to the local park and slept on a bench for a couple of nights until I thought, all right, this is a bit more uncomfortable than I had anticipated. And I manipulated my way into somebody's house until I was taken into foster care and under Angli care. And I had foster parents, a foster mother that I'm still quite close to now, which is like 30-something years later.
Wow.
Not 30, 29 years later, I think it is, 28 years, something like that. Anyways, and it was just a progression, you know. You went from, I was like this bored kid that wanted to have a good time, you know, got into party drugs. That's really how it starts, you know. Nobody sets out going, I want to be injecting smack in my arm. Like, right. I don't know if that's what you guys called it, but that's what.
Yeah.
So nobody starts off like that. And it was just, you know, at first it was maybe a bit of weed, and that was never my thing. But then it was like, you know, I got introduced to ecstasy, like MDMA. Back then it was ice. I don't know. I think you guys call it. I think it's meth here. I don't know.
Do you know something? Have you done that?
All that.
Wow. Because someone said to me that if you take that, like you don't sleep for like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. So the way it worked, it ended up like I would go out on Thursday night and essentially get back on Sunday afternoon. And so you would take in all those uppers, you take the MDMA, the ecstasy for the lovey-dovey feeling, and then you would take the amphetamine. So whether it was just speed, meth, ice, whatever, to keep you going. And then Sunday, you would start to crash, and it'd take you about 2 days to recover. And you're talking about like a teenager, so your recovery is quicker compared to, like, I can't imagine, it'll probably take me 3 months to recover from that now. But as a kid, the recovery was about 2 days. And it was horrible. Like whatever went up really had to come down, and it was tough. And after probably about a year of that being my weekly routine.
How old was you then?
Like 15.
Wow.
Yeah, and one of my mates at the time, you know, you dreaded the come down, but you know, the high was so fun, and that was just the routine. And by this point, I was already injecting everything because I realized, why would I take speed or ice, snort it, and hurt my face and my head and my nose, and for half the high and a much slower high than when I learnt to inject it in my arm. Like, you've literally, half the thing was just feeling it go up and hit you instantly in the head. I don't know if you've ever, it's a bit like people that have had any operation. Have you had an operation before? Yeah. So, you know, when you count down.
Oh, with the anesthetic.
Any anesthetic. So they give you the countdown and you just feel it just go in, and you just, so you get that every high.
Right.
And not necessarily to put you out. It's the same thing for if you're going on speed. You go from being normal to suddenly at the peak of the high straight away in 10 seconds. So I learned quite quickly, don't waste drugs on snorting it when you can do it that way. But it was a Sunday evening, and we were just about to prepare for, getting ready for this recovery. And we're just dreading it. And my mate goes to me, look, I got something that'll make your recovery disappear, but you got to promise me you're not going to bang it in your arm. And I'm like, I just go, yeah, sweet. Like, let's, for sure, the anything that could help this recovery, that's the horrible part of my week. And he pulled out a little rock and we burnt it on some foil. And, in a couple of minutes, my come down became not only, it was non-existent. I was actually feeling nice because that was the moment I got addicted to heroin. And it was because it's a physical and mental painkiller. That's the way I describe it. And I was obviously at that point in physical pain from the come down. That's your body's in a lot of pain, but also mentally, I was this teenager with no real, at that time, family or, my life was a massive mess. I was this teenage kid alone out in the big bad world. And then I go to him, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I go to him, hey, just chuck me a little rock to take home so that I can, before bed, just have a little bit of a burn to make sure that I survive this come down, or to help me through the rest of the come down when this wears off. And he goes, yeah, no dramas. Just make sure, promise me you're not going to bang it in your arm. And I don't think he believed me because he knew, but it's probably, he wanted to feel better about giving it to me so that it's not, it's not on his hands, because he knew what this meant. And I go, yeah, for sure. And I went home and just banged that in my arm. And for the next few months, it was like up on Thursday till Sunday, then get some in me, and the come down was gone until, it became a point where I was like looking forward to Thursday, not to Thursday. I was looking forward to our party, which I used to always look forward to, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday party, but I was actually looking forward to it so I could get to Sunday. And I was like, why am I even bothering with Thursday, Friday, Saturday getting high when I can just go straight for and that's how I ended up with a massive habit on just heroin. My whole life revolved around my next fix.
How did you pay for that? And was you
petty crime? So you just did everything. That's why I was in and out of court.
Arrested, right? Okay.
Yeah, I was in and out of court, and because I was young, the court system went really, really light, and in my case, it probably worked. When I say it worked, I think if they threw the book at me at first, maybe it would have snapped me out of it earlier. But I don't know. I know one other person from that period that got out of it. I think off the top of my head, most other people I've literally watched on TV. Not long ago, I was watching the local news, and they're talking about this stabbing, fatal stabbing in an area that I grew up with, and then I see the name and the face. I'm like, holy crap, that's a guy that I used to hang out with. And so all the guys back then, they're either full blown junkies now, in jail, or dead.
Wow.
And I know everybody. It kind of sounds cliche.
But that is the
that's a lot.
That's it.
That's where you head when you go on that. So for me, I'm really lucky I managed to get out of it.
But that to me is how the fuck you're committing these crimes, you're addicted, your life becomes drugs.
Yep.
How do you actually go, do you know what? Fuck this, I'm going to get out of it. How do you even do that? What was the trigger that made you go, I need to fucking beat this?
Yeah, so I had, and again, I talk about it a lot in the book, but I had my rock bottom. And so for me, the rock bottom was, and it probably comes down to the fact that I always looked at my time on drugs and crime as like, I'm just passing through. Like I looked at myself at junkies' houses like, you guys have had an actual messed up life. For me, this is just like, I'm passing through. These are my teenage years, and one day I'm going to be something.
This is your moment of just getting out of hand.
Yeah, and so it was, I guess, some sort of, you could probably some sort of arrogance. I don't know, that I thought that I was just passing through, and my life really wasn't as bad as them, because I wasn't, beat up to the extent a lot of these kids, their stories, like when I lived in all these group homes, their stories were messed up. These kids were bashed to a pulp when they were kids. A lot of them were on steroids from the doctor because of the injuries that they sustained as kids. So they had physical and mental pain that I didn't have. And I remember it was just, for me, the rock bottom was when I was staying at a mate's place. We were good mates, and Australia's system as a kid, you shouldn't really have to be homeless. You shouldn't, because it's almost it's a welfare state to a degree, especially with kids. So there's no reason except for laziness as to why I was homeless. But I just, because my whole life was about getting the next fix, I was literally sleeping at my friend's place on his bed. It was like a double bed, and he had there was a coffee table. In my head, it was probably 5 meters. I don't know how far it was from the bed, but it was about 5 meters away. And I remember I always planned for the short-term next thing. So I thought I'd always set it. So, we got on it at night, and then I prepared the syringe and the fix just so I have to bang it in my arm. And I put it on the table in the middle of the room. And that's because anyone that's ever done heroin, when you come off the high, when you need it, what it essentially is it's you have the worst flu of your life. Like your entire body aches, and it's physical. It's not only mental. Some of the other drugs is a lot more mental than physical. It's physical because your body stops producing. I forgot what drug it is, but your brain stops producing that one particular drug that.
Is it serotonin?
Is it serotonin?
I'm not sure, but I think it might be.
I think it's look, it's a drug that stops you from even, when you bend your elbows, to stop that hurting. Your body produces drugs so that it's like a natural painkiller. So you don't live in pain from every little movement. Now, when you do heroin, and especially once you're addicted to it, your body stops producing it because your brain's going, hold on, we've got an overload of this stuff. So you wake up in the morning like, with the worst flu, like any flu that you think you had, COVID, times that by 100. That's how you feel when you're off it. And so I planned for it.
They call it cold turkey, right? That's when you get off it, isn't it?
But it's not. It's not when you're quitting. I'm saying even when you wake up in the morning. So you've taken it at night, and then you wake up in the morning, and you wake up with that sickness, and it's a horrible flu, the worst flu. That's how you wake up, and you're nauseous, and you just, and then, so I woke up feeling as I expected to feel, and it was the worst in my life. And I remember crawling. I had to physically crawl to that table, which felt like 2 hours, but it was probably, I don't know. It probably took me a few minutes to get there. And I got there, and I just inject what I'd prepared, and, grateful that I didn't have to go through the pain of preparing it, because it would have taken an extra, what would have felt like another 2 hours. And I put it in my arm, and all that happened was I felt normal. And that was the biggest high in my life. So when you first take it, the high is actually the physical high that it gives you, and the mental high that it gives you, just like being, this is amazing. But at that point, the high was simply feeling normal. And it's the biggest high, because think about it. Think about the worst sickness you've ever felt. Imagine going to the doctor, and the doctor gives you a magical injection that makes you feel normal. You would be high of light. You'd feel so energized from that. And I remember taking that going, that can't be right. Like, I could be naturally high every day if I just didn't take the drugs. And I realized for me, so I was at that time, I probably weighed 40 something kilos.
Wow.
Because I was a bag of bones. I was, and I walked to my parents' house, which was only a few blocks. I hadn't seen them in a while. And I remember just knocking on my parents' on the door. I was probably 17 by this point. And my mum opens the door, and I just broke down. It was the first time I cried.
They must have been horrified to see their boy.
I think my mum was. My dad was much more, practical about it. He had to call he was a born again Jew. That's probably the best way to to explain it to the wider community. Like so he was quite fundamentalist at that time. So his first response was, well, we have to ask the rabbi if we can bring him in the house. And the rabbi said, well, if the doctor says.
Because your dad obviously was very religious at that point, did he blame it on something? Was he looking for something to blame it on?
Not necessarily. It was more just like, according to the letter of the law, and the problem would have been having me in the house because I would be breaking the Sabbath. I'm not keeping the rules. And the rabbi said that if it's like, it depends what the doctor says, but if it's life and death, then obviously you need to. It's not only that you can, you have to have him. And the doctor came in and just goes, yeah, this is life. And that's how I got off it. I relapsed one time where I did die. That was in the middle of my army service. I came back to Australia and I caught up with some old mates and we just did it for old time's sake.
You was in the army in Australia?
In Israel.
Oh, so you've beaten your addiction.
Yes, I went from rehab. So that was the first time I self-imposed rehab. I was court-ordered a bunch of times, which I just used as a good opportunity to lower my tolerance so that I could get higher when I got out. And I didn't mind it. Rehab was kind of like the you got that love, that motherly love from all these social workers that were really sweet and kind. And so it was a good, reset. But this was the first time I put myself out of my own will and realizing I need to, that's it. I had my fun for
So you went back to Israel and then you joined.
Yeah, I didn't go back because I'd never really, I'd been there once, twice, but I was born in Australia, raised in Australia. But first I went to the Australian Army information session and they started to talk about, things that could stop you from joining and criminal history. And I was like, yeah, okay.
Have you ever taken drugs? Yes.
I was like, holy crap, I don't reckon. I just thought, it's too much of a pain to even fight this. And also I walked out thinking, well, what am I going to do in the Australian Army? I'm going to be deployed overseas. If I get deployed, it's going to be deployed overseas to fight somebody else's war. Whereas in Israel, I knew they ain't going to be looking at my criminal history. And I'll be fighting, for the existence of my people, my side of the family, which is, but also just the only Jewish state. So it felt more important.
Because in Israel, am I right in saying that if you live there, you have to go in the army, you have to serve.
Last week, an Israeli soldier on the front line that's in Gaza right now, he articulated it perfectly for me. The difference between professional armies like the British Army, the Australian Army, the American Army, here it's a professional army that you sign up to, and I think they're heroes. Almost everyone that signs up and serves their country, but you sign up to a professional army. You sign up to go and fight wars. Whereas in Israel, it's an army by the people, for the protection and the survival of the people, because everybody at 18 has to put on a uniform. And that is because if they don't, then as soon as they don't have a defense on the border, we saw what happened on October 7. Almost all the neighbors will just walk through and wipe out the Jewish state. So it's about your existence. So it's not that you sign up. Most Israeli soldiers actually don't want to go to war, but they know that they have to sign up. They have to put on the uniform. They have to stand on the border.
That's men and women. Everybody has to do it.
Yep.
Right, okay. So then when you did that and you joined up, how long was you in the army for?
Almost 3 years, yeah.
And then did you sort of go through that and then think, I don't want to do this anymore, or is that the minimum amount of time you could do?
No, that's right. That was the time that you have to do. Then you can sign up for more. I wasn't willing to sign up for more. I was quite young, like I was 18, 19 to 21, 22, like it was.
And then did you then go back to Australia?
Yes, I went from there and I got married for the first time, which probably.
How many times have you been married?
I'm in my second marriage.
Right, okay.
I had a 10-year marriage, which was quite toxic.
Right.
But 21-year-old, what does he know? Don't know himself. Did
you have children in your first marriage?
Yeah, I have 2 children in my first marriage, and well, that finally, I think I recognized in the beginning it was probably the wrong thing, but I didn't know myself, let alone know what I needed as a and I think a lot of men fall in that trap, and probably women too.
When you say it was toxic, was it would you say it was like an abusive marriage, so that you'd argue a lot and you'd...
So my ex was like, she was a bit older than me. She had 2 of her own kids already. And I think...
You was a toy boy, weren't you?
She used to show off. She's got the Israeli soldier as a partner. And then, and she used to tell me about how she was, badly abused by her ex and whatever. And I think I had this, what do they call it? Messiah complex, where I felt like I had to save her. Ironically enough, she made the same claims about me at the end of it all, right. And which became quite public just because the media latched onto it. And I wasn't able to talk. I wasn't able to defend myself in the public arena until, that's why I wrote my book, because for about 3 years I was stopped from being. I wasn't able to respond to what people were writing about my life, about my personal life. Very. I would say half truths, but I'd be pretty generous to say that. So my book was actually me being able to calm down, and it taught me a lot of patience. I'm not the one to generally stay quiet for a few years about anything, but I'm quite happy that I did, because it gave me a chance to really think about how I portray it. Because at the end of the day, my kids, and I think that matters. When I say family matters most, my kids matter at the top of that list. And I would hate to have reacted in the beginning out of the pain that I felt. And I know a lot of men do. What I went through is not unique. And there's, I talk about it in that book. There's the day, I got stopped from seeing my kids suddenly. I got criminally charged for crimes I didn't commit. And I didn't know when I'd see my kids. And it's all this formula that in Australia, but I imagine is probably here, that is used against men in relationship breakdowns, in toxic relationship breakdowns, as a kind of vengeance. It only happened when I, posted my first photo of my new partner 18 months after I broke up. Suddenly I was hit with all of this. And I remember there was a day that we say is a day we don't talk about, and it's probably the second time in my adult life that I bawled my eyes out. And to be honest, if I didn't have my current wife there by my side, I probably would have offed myself. And I can understand why so many men going through those relationship breakdowns and who have no idea how this is possible. That they do end up taking their own lives, because I consider myself a pretty strong person, at least mentally. And I can tell you now, if she wasn't there, I probably wouldn't be here today.
What was so essentially what happened when you had the breakup? I know lots of people that have had really bad divorces where the women, want to kill the man wants to kill the woman, and then they end up, going to court, and they spend all this money on legal fees, and then they say this, they try and stop the kids, and it happens both ways. But I've definitely heard more men have had a rougher time. And obviously, what was it she did to actually make this happen? Then was she just literally going to me going, this is what he's done to me?
So no, she didn't.
Was you already well known then? Was you already?
Yeah, I was pretty well known, but I think so. But it has nothing to do with that. I think the media just loved it because it was an opportunity to try to tear me down, which is something that they've tried to do for years. But essentially what happened was we broke up, and it was reasonably amicable. I had the kids half the time. I do say that, I went from 21 to 31 being married. I missed probably what should have been my funnest years as a single dude, and that's where Tinder kind of came out, and I saw all these.
You signed up.
I saw all these blokes that I went to school with when we were kids, and they're suddenly like hitting glamours. I'm like thinking, how this guy was too scared to approach a girl in his life. I was the one of the group that would walk up to 10 girls, get slapped 9 times, and lock in the 10th. Like, I had no shame. I didn't care. It was, I was the one that was outgoing. But suddenly there was this new app that every pussy was able to get, and that didn't exist before I was around. And I was like really excited. I broke up. I was like, I jump on those apps, and oh my God. And that it was short-lived fun. It was probably a month of where it was fun, and then it became. But I you know, after my separation, I got a bit wild. I'm not denying that. I felt like I was set free, but
It was 18 again.
I felt like I was 18 again, and I was 31, but then I happened to meet. Like I wasn't looking for it. I really wasn't looking for it. I was like, man, I got out of jail free card. Finally, relationship. But I met my current wife, which it was something completely different. It was, oh crap. And you got to remember, like I also didn't have a healthy example of what a relationship should look like. I didn't understand that. That's why I accepted being
In a toxic relationship.
A toxic relationship where I was abused in so many ways in my, I just accepted it because I thought that's just normal. That's part of a relationship. I probably witnessed something similar when I was a kid. I don't know. But when I met my current wife, it was then, when I was excited by the new relationship, especially after, because when I broke up and I went through that party period, it actually didn't fill me in any way. I was actually probably sadder and lonelier in that period than I was even in my marriage. So when I met her, I was excited and I posted a photo of us. And long story short, there is a formula that many women can use and many divorce lawyers help women using, especially in Australia, but I imagine it's something similar here because I've looked at Israel and that, and it's also similar there. And essentially, they stop you from seeing your kids. And I've got to be careful. There's still, in Australia, there's still laws around how you talk about these things. But they stop you from seeing your kids. They make allegations, and it's just even the allegations for the sake of allegations, because what happens is while you have open domestic violence charges, if and the cops are pretty lenient, it's all about believe the woman. So, and they said to me at the time, no, that's okay. If you didn't do it, you'll win it. Easy to say when the process is the punishment itself, because while you have open domestic violence cases, you're not getting your kids. So I was essentially advised, you have two options here. You could plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit, and it was a summary assault for throwing a chopping board that hit your ex-wife a few years ago during a heated argument, and plead guilty to that and cop a fine, and you'll get your kids back now. Or fight to clear your name because you're scared of that headline, Avi Yemini convicted for assaulting ex-wife. You're scared of that headline. You can fight for what it is, 12 months, 2 years, whatever it takes to clear your name, and then you can fight to see your kids. And and because of the period in between, it's an uphill battle, even fighting for your kids. But you can do that, clear your name. And I chose my kids over my pride, and I'll do it again today. As painful as it was, hearing for 3 years, being labeled the one thing that I fucking hate in my life, a woman basher, I just had to cop it, because for me, it was about my kids. And I found it, the media that was in that court hearing, and they knew the context behind it. And even though there's certain things you can't report, and they knew the context behind it, but they picked, I knew what they were going to write, and they picked it. And I just found it funny. So many people that jumped on it, the haters, they never shared even the story that was shared. They just ran with that headline. He pled guilty to assault, which technically was true. I pled guilty to assaulting my ex-wife, but it was a crime I didn't commit. And it was literally, even if it was a crime that I had committed, it wasn't to bashing my wife, it was to slamming a chopping board out of anger in a toxic relationship that hit her. And the media were in there, they were asking, that they asked the court for permission to be able to run, all the photos and the police reports and the hospital document, and it was granted. Guess what they ran? Nothing. You know why? Because there was no evidence. Because it was such a non-issue. It didn't actually happen. But the court granted them to run. They wanted, the photo of my.
Why did they want that stuff? What was the reason for wanting access to it?
Because they wanted to run it on the front page. They ran their headline, Avi Yemini pleads guilty to assaulting
what-
ex-wife, but they would love a
Was
big
there something that you done to upset them, or
Oh, my existence upsets mainstream media. They didn't like it because
because that's really what I'm interested in. Because obviously, like you said, earlier, you said obviously you've had lots of problems with different sort of journalists and broadcasters. But what caused that? What was the start of that?
I think I don't think there's one reason for all of it. I think I think many journalists look at me and they're just jealous. They're jealous because, if you look at media, what matters to them is ratings, eyeballs, people following, and I beat them in all of those. And they think, oh, well, I went to, journalism school for 5 years and this little schmuck is walking in there just telling the story and he's getting, I think that it is as superficial as that for many journalists.
Wow.
And then there are those that are really ideological. Like I think many journalists are not ideological. They just go with the narrative because you're not going to get a job if you don't. They don't really care. But I think other journalists, it is ideological. So they want to tear me down because they are far left-wing activists with a journalism job.
So when you started off, right, you've come out of the army in Israel, gone back to Australia. At that point, obviously you was on social media.
Well, actually, so this is interesting because you said your mate that runs Krav Maga. When I got back to Australia, I actually set up gyms. They were called IDF training gyms, and it was a play on words, individual diet and fitness, and to train with an ex-IDF soldier. It was about personal training.
Got it.
But when I started it, we started getting I was working really hard to pick up personal training clients, and people were just calling us about Krav Maga. I was like, my Jewish senses kicked in. I'm like, why am I working like a dog to try train people in fitness when there's about 1 million personal training studios around, when people are coming to me for Krav Maga? That means there's a market there. So I started, I bought my first Krav Maga instructor from Israel, and I thought I'll test the waters. And the first night, I think we had like 60 people on the first class. I was like, holy crap. And I didn't even have to do much. So I ended up building, I think it was about over 8 years, two of the most successful Krav Maga gyms.
Wow.
24.
So you was the Mr. Krav Maga of Australia.
And the funny thing is, I wasn't a trainer or anything. I was the face of it, but it was a business for me. And it also had like 24-hour
Did you actually learn it as well?
A little in the army. Like everyone, it was funny because it taught me two things that period, right? So how did I get into what I'm doing now? Well, firstly, ironically, because of what's going on now, it was one of the operations in Gaza where, I wasn't a political guy. I couldn't have told you the difference between left and right. What do you have here? Tories and
Labour.
And Labour, yeah, Tories and Labour. Here. So for us, it's Liberal and Labour. I couldn't have told you the difference between them, even though these days sometimes it becomes hard to tell the difference between them. But I couldn't have told you what the difference between them. I wouldn't have cared. I was apathetic like most Aussies. But I sat down one night and I chucked on ABC News, which is like your BBC, and I see them reporting about the conflict in Gaza. And I'm thinking, I was stationed exactly where they had their cameras. And I could see how they manipulated the stories, picked, pulled half things in there. And I'm like, that was my introduction to fake news. So what I did was I went on to our Facebook pages at the time, the IDF training Facebook pages, which was really for gyms. It had like 60,000 followers. It was like super popular at that time. You're talking about, I think it's probably 13 years ago or something.
Wow.
There's
a lot of people there.
There was a lot of people. There was our gyms managed. So there was two things. So I started there and I became really good at getting our gyms into the media. I realized how easy it was and how lazy the mainstream media was, that all it took was a press release once a week, a story, give them a story, and they'll almost run it exactly. And that's what people need to understand. The mainstream media literally run off press releases from corporate and government. And they don't actually do their own investigations most of the time. It's literally reproducing a press release, and that's what makes a good press release. Is if you can give you give them a story that they go, oh sweet, I can run that. And it's an art. That's why PR companies exist. They charge millions of dollars a month for something that I worked out myself, and so I just started.
Have you ever thought about setting up your own PR agency?
Yeah. How to destroy your brand. But I essentially started giving my view on the conflict as somebody who served there. And it created, as you can imagine, a bit like doing it today, let's call it discussion on this Facebook page. Back then you could say a lot more on social media.
Did you find that a lot of people were like backing it, or did you have sort of after people saying, yeah, great, and other saying, no, it's all bollocks and you're a liar and whatever?
It was both, right? It created heated conversation. We lost members off it, but we also gained members by standing for something. But I think at that time I didn't care because I thought, when people were saying, I'm a member, I come to train at your gym, I don't want to hear your political views. I'd go, dude, you're coming to learn Krav Maga at a gym called IDF Training. Krav Maga is the Israeli army's self-defense system, which is built on the theology, the idea of how the IDF operates in all its self-defenses. So this is the hand-to-hand combat, but it's applied to all their self-defenses. It teaches you to strike first when they're coming for it. So I thought, I don't care if you leave our gym because you hate Israel.
Right.
Piss off. Go learn Wing Chun or whatever, I didn't care. And then there was obviously people that joined because
Wing Chun is good, but I think a lot of the martial arts, I mean, I've tried a few of them.
I wasn't dissing Wing Chun. I was just saying then you won't have a problem.
But I find that like with all martial arts, it's a lot of walking up and down, doing stuff. What I like about Krav Maga is straight off the bat, you're in, right? And out of all the martial arts I've done probably about 6. That is my favourite, and that's not for any other reason other than it was something you could use. Whereas all the other stuff was all.
Well, that was the idea of it. Anyways, when the conflict kind of ended, I think I found my voice, and I talk about it in my book as well. I'm one of 17 kids, so attention has always been something I loved.
Regarding your book, for anybody that's watching this and goes, I want to read that book. Yeah, is it available worldwide?
Yeah, you can get it here in the UK. So you can either go to Amazon. It's called A Rebel from the Start, or you can go to rebelfromthestart.com and you can get it through there. But so when the conflict ended, I feel like I found my voice. I was voicing my opinions on stuff, and I just kept doing it because I was enjoying that. And members of the gym who came to me and said, "Look, Avi, I actually agree with probably most of what you're saying, but I don't think it's the best idea using your business platform to basically." To share your views on political stuff. Israel, I understand, and the army, that makes sense. But all this other stuff, it was about all social issues. It didn't there was anything coming up in the media. I just used the platform, and I go, yeah, you know what, fair. So I opened a Facebook page, and I go, hey guys, anyone that wants to hear views, whether you agree, disagree, come over to this page because I'm just going to use it on the personal platform. And that's how I started.
And that was under your name?
It was under my name. Right. It's a long time ago. It got banned. Right. But so now the Rebel News that I work for, they have Facebook. The only platforms I can't really be on is like Facebook and TikTok for some reason. I don't know. But so mostly.
What caused the banning then? Was it just because I'm just interested? Yeah.
I posted a photo with Tommy Robinson and his face is banned.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So he's the face of hate. And I don't know how you feel about Tommy, but I think that he's probably one of the most persecuted and misunderstood people that I've ever met. And he's actually one of the most genuine people I've ever met. I don't necessarily, and I hate when people say this, I don't necessarily agree with the way he goes about everything. But also I don't come from his background. I was never a football hooligan. I don't have half the balls that guy has. Right. Like I've walked around in the UK with him, and firstly I've witnessed how the average person treats him on the street. It's very different to how the mainstream media and the political elite portray him. But also I also seen when the once in a while somebody does pick a fight with him, and he's willing to talk to everyone and engage with everyone. And he's full of banter, But then if somebody does, attack him, he's not the one to take it. Like, I haven't seen him start a fight. I've seen him finish a few.
I mean, look, he's a Marmite character. And I think if you look back, I mean, I remember, I think it was 8 years ago, he did an Oxford Union address, right? And a lot of the things that he said in there, people listened to, and then lots of people, when I looked at the comments, I think something like 3.5, 4 million people watched that. Right? It's a lot of people that have actually tuned in and watched it. And a lot of the comments were, I thought he was a far-right racist. I thought he was a member of the, Nazi party. And I think the problem is he was highlighting issues which existed, but people didn't want to bring to the
100%.
forefront. Like a little bit like what you've done. You've been vocal, and people are like, shut this guy up. We don't want to hear his views, right? Because they don't fit with their views. And I think it's very easy. If you're a football hooligan, you're a working class kid from Luton, if you're actually calling somebody out, if it had been some white people doing it, it would have probably been more acceptable.
Yeah.
But because it was obviously an ethnic thing, they could basically say, well, actually, you're only doing this because you're anti-Islam or you're racist.
They didn't want to talk about the issues that he was bringing up. They targeted the person.
But what was interesting for me was at the time I was like, I hadn't met him at that point, and I'd looked at it all, and I just thought, is this guy racist? Are these people doing this? Is it fake news? Is it true? And I did think at the time, when I kept seeing him on Twitter, on all these platforms, and he was, he got arrested and got nicked and for saying all this stuff. And I did think at the time, there's got to be something about this because this guy's either fucking nuts or he's actually fighting for something, and there is something going on here. And then if you actually fast forward now and look back, it's like, oh, these people were doing this and they've been arrested. So you sort of think, well, whether you love or hate him as a character, you should go, well, actually, he did highlight this thing. And I did actually ask him about it. And I actually said to him, I said, you've basically been cancelled and ruined your life to expose this. And he said, something? He said, I am actually happy that my life has been ruined because this has actually been brought to the forefront now. So he said it's highlighted an issue that needs to be solved. And I actually thought, you've actually thrown yourself under a bus for the greater good. And there's not many people in the world that would do that. So whether you love or hate him as a person, whether you think he's racist or not, what he did was he highlighted an issue, and the issue has now been proved to have existed, and the people that were doing it have been brought to justice, which is great. That's my sort of opinion on that. But I think lots of people, I think it's very difficult in the current environment that we're in. People, we're ultra woke now, and people are offended by everything. So, obviously, like you were saying earlier, the way he speaks and the way he says things, if you was on that way, you would find him offensive, and you would say he is that guy. Yep. And you wouldn't listen to anything else. And you wouldn't listen.
Easy. He made it easy for the detractors and the entire establishment and the system to cancel him, to end him. And that was one of the things that, again, I talk about in the book that I learned from Tommy. There was a bunch of things I learned from Tommy. And one of them was not to let them do that to me. So by the time he started fighting back against the system, it was too late. They ended him. And that was one of those things that I learned.
Do you think he will ever be allowed back on the platforms? Do you think that the way that people sort of view him will change, or do you think he's always going to have that battle?
I don't think he's going to be allowed back on the platforms. I think that the platforms are going to change, and he's going to be there when they do. That the internet is shifting, and the idea that they can control the narrative is dying. And I think wherever it leads, because he's so consistent and he doesn't, stray from his message, no matter what the backlash is, and including from his own people. So I've watched over the current Gaza, the Israel conflict with the Hamas. I've watched, so a few years ago when Trump was in, it was cool on the right to be pro-Israel. So a lot of the big names, the Tommy Robinsons of the people with big platforms that were highlighting, whether it was the issues that Tommy was highlighting, but any conservative issue, they were proud to say Israel's in the right here. Come on, you can't stand with terrorists. Or they were happy to repeat the talking points of the pro-Israel side. Now it's almost become it's a period now where it's become cool on all sides, the fringes of the right as well as the left. It's always been like that, and obviously the majority of the Muslim world, where essentially taking Hamas's side, a terrorist group side, has become cool. It's a weird thing to understand, but it's not the Trump era. So on the fringes of the right, those guys that were, and I've seen a lot of people that I've watched for many years and thought, oh yeah, they talk, and I realized, and I don't think they believe what they're saying. I think that they're just looking at their audience and they go, and their audience is going to love them for it. So they're cowering to the audience. Now, Tommy Robinson has never done that. I've looked at Tommy and I've gone, holy crap, it would be so much easier for someone like Tommy on the Israel-Hamas thing to take Hamas's side, because he will gather like Andrew Tate converting to Islam, like a guy that doesn't actually know anything about the faith, converted to Islam when it got cancelled because it was a perfect bet for him. He was getting cancelled, similar to Tommy, and suddenly he had 1 billion new followers, and now in this conflict, taking Hamas aside, it just made it's so easy, and so many people. Andrew Tate's an example of that to an extreme, because he went as far as converting, whereas there are so many on the right that did that. Tommy Robinson, if he had done that, he would have gained so many more followers, and people that definitely wrote him off years ago, especially from the Islamic community, probably would have sided with him now. They would have excused him, just as they excused Andrew Tate, who's also, I think, from Luton, who I think was
I don't know, I've never met him.
Andrew Tate is also he was friends with Tommy back then, and if you watch his old content, he was a massive Tommy supporter. Andrew Tate, they excused all his anti-Islam rhetoric because he became Muslim, and now he's saying all the right things. Tommy could have done the same, and the Jewish community have not. When I talk about the Jewish community, I'm talking about the establishment within the Jewish community, who probably hate me as they do. They don't like me either. But they have never been kind to Tommy Robinson, and Tommy has almost every reason from an emotional, personal place to turn on Israel, to turn on the Jews, and he's never done it. You know why? Because he's consistent and he's principled, and for him it has always been about the issues. And this current conflict has highlighted all those and shown people for who they are.
Do you know what? I genuinely believe this. I think if you have your opinions, right, and I have my opinions, and we don't agree, right, I don't care. I think you're entitled to
absolutely.
And I think people, it's like you go and watch a movie, and you watch a movie, and I come out and I go, that was shit, and you go, well, I thought it was one of the fucking best films ever, right? I like that actor. I fucking hate the actor, right? So everything's subjective, and I think everybody should have their own. Everybody should be allowed to say whatever they want.
Yep.
And whether you like it or whether you hate it, if you don't like it, don't fucking
I
tune
agree.
into
the
them.
line
You know what I
again
mean?
goes back to what we were saying. The line should only be incitement to violence. You don't have to like what Tommy's saying, but as soon as he incites violence, that's where you can have a problem. That's where you can. I don't even think cancel him, but he should face the prosecution, the law. The law that steps in at that point. But he never is charged for those things. It's always these ridiculous, even when he got nicked that you were talking about, it was for reading from a BBC. I remember watching that live, reading from the BBC article, the names of grooming gang members that were going in, and he was hassling them, and they essentially got convicted, and I remember when his detractors were saying, well, there was a suppression order, which was weird because their names were already published in this BBC article that he was reading from, but also that it was somehow going to interfere with the case. That was already over. They were only going for sentencing, so he couldn't have had any impact on the case. That's the kind of stuff they locked him up for. They didn't actually target him for what they claim he is, which is this hateful, he's never been charged for hate crimes. Right. It's always been ridiculous other stuff because
you also mentioned the BBC there. You've had a little bit of a run-in with the BBC.
You know what? I've spent the last 2 weeks running around the front line of the conflict in Israel and Hamas looking for the BBC, because I have confronted them when I was a bit younger in those Tommy days.
What did you confront them about? What was the...
Just about being fake news. I remember the way that they were covering the Free Tommy rallies about those cases where he was nicked and he was locked up. And so there was that period where there were big protests around the world. And I came to London and I guess I confronted the BBC reporter there. Look, I watch a lot of my old content from those times and I cringe, which is a good thing. I think that if you grow, you probably should be embarrassed of your initial work.
But you want to do a part 2, basically.
I did. I tried to find the BBC out in Israel. To imagine my shock that they weren't actually on the front line. I think they were probably standing in the safety of Tel Aviv,
right,
doing their live cross interviews from not from the actual conflict, but from the safety of Tel Aviv. But I wanted to confront them because, during this conflict, they refused to call Hamas terrorists, which they are a designated terrorist group here in the UK. They also amplified the lie that Israel bombed a hospital and killed 500 civilians, which turned out, no, it was Islamic Jihad, which misfired a rocket that landed in a parking lot next to the hospital that killed about 50 people. So they killed their own. And that lie, the reason why that lie is so dangerous is because you saw it being used in mass protests here to target the smallest minority probably in the UK, or one of the smallest.
The problem is, if you read that, you are outraged by that.
Exactly.
And you just think, why would anybody do that?
And when it comes from an authority like the BBC, you assume they fact-checked it. But no, they took the word of a terrorist group that they refused to call a terrorist group. So that was like I was really excited to confront them because, that's what I like doing, is holding
obviously
those accountable.
there's been a lot of these, different things that, you did get threatened at one point by, was it the vice president of CNBC? What happened with that?
I was at the World Economic Forum and one of our guys noticed the vice president, or at the time I just thought he was an editor or whatever. And I went over and just, big unit. And I went over to him and said, I want to ask him, you've got the CNBC, literally like a building that they've popped up right at the entrance of the World Economic Forum. They were invited guests. They were part of the World Economic Forum. And I thought, well, isn't that a conflict of interest? So I thought I wanted to ask him about, don't you think there's a conflict of interest when you should be here asking the tough questions that many of us around the world, most people around the world want answered, because, this was off the back of COVID, of, 2 or 3 years of hell that the average person suffered from the agenda set at somewhere like the World Economic Forum. So I went to ask him those basic questions and, he pushed my mic away and then he tried to he went back inside, and one of our guys happened to be inside and had a mic on him and caught him literally threatening to bash me for doing his job. That's the crazy thing. Think about it.
But if that had happened, you'd have crab guard his ass.
He was about 4 times my size. I'm not sure I would have won that fight.
Right.
But he really wanted to bash me, and I think he may have won it. Like, I think he would have.
You'd have got a lot of views though.
I think Joe Rogan loved that little interaction because
do you know what?
exposes.
That is the funniest thing that I've seen. On Valentine's Day, Joe Rogan talking about you. I mean, was that the minute when you thought, I'm actually getting some traction here?
Look, I think
because he's the man, isn't he? I mean, he's
Joe Rogan. Yeah. You've made it when Joe Rogan's talking about you. And what was funny in that is Joe Rogan. So like he ends that segment with saying, "Oh, is that the guy that's the guy that exposed Jim Jefferies?" And I was thinking, oh crap, because he's obviously been watching my stuff for a while, because Jim Jefferies was in it was in 2000. It was early 2019, I think. Oh no, it was right at the Christchurch massacre. So I think it was 2009.
So a lot of people listening and watching to this podcast may not know who Jim Jefferies is. They can obviously look at the video online, but do you want to talk a little bit about how you exposed him and what he did?
Yeah. So Jim Jefferies is an Aussie comedian who I think his old stuff was like funny because it was the way he portrayed himself was this outrageous, could say anything.
Like Jimmy Carr, but the Australian version.
Yeah. And then, but he only really became famous when he went to the US and did this whole anti-gun routine. And so it made him a poster boy of the left wing, you know, anti-gun, democratic, whatever. And, you know, he became woke, which was weird because he was, you know, every second word he drops a C-bomb and, he kind of made fun of all that stuff. But he continued to do so. But he had a Comedy Central show. And anyways, they reached out to me and said, hey, we're doing an episode on, the right wing in Australia. And I knew because I quickly Googled and looked at a couple of shows and I saw how he stitched up Jordan Peterson and another Aussie MP. So I said to him, yeah, no dramas. I'll come on the show, but on two conditions. One, you don't put me, with actual neo-Nazis in the same segment. And two, you don't cut my, like if you ask me a question, put the answer to that question, don't cut it to another one, which seemed pretty fair to me, two basic things. And they said, yeah, no dramas, yeah, for sure. Anyways, they had to fly me to Singapore to do it. I went there and what I did when I got there, there was a room, about 20 of them in the room, and they were so self-absorbed, they didn't notice me walk over to the couch on the side of this studio, or makeshift studio in a bar that they set up. And I just propped up 2 iPhones. I did 2 in case one failed, which was lucky because one of them did fail. And I thought, I'm just going to get my own copy of this entire interview. Because I knew, my gut feeling is that they're going to screw me on both those things. And what happened was, months later, like it didn't air for months. Months later was the horrific Christchurch massacre where some
remember that
white supremacist piece of shit like went in and targeted innocent civilians in a mosque, butchering 51 people.
Wow.
And what Jim Jefferies did
was that the one where he streamed it live, and they said it was like some weird like Call of Duty fan, but he just got obsessed by doing this. And
I look, I'm not going to pretend to know why he did it, but he's a scumbag. That
absolutely,
yeah. So, but then what happened was Jim Jefferies then aired our interview and framed it. So he did, not only did he do the 2 things that I said, not, that we agreed they wouldn't do, put me with neo-Nazis and put me and cut my questions. He put it in response to the Christchurch massacre and framed it as if I was one of the people that radicalized that monster. And I was like I was sitting, it was a Jewish holiday called Purim where you get on the piss. It's actually one of the good Jewish holidays. It's one where I become very observant.
Very Jewish.
Yeah. You're meant to get that drunk that you don't know the difference between good and evil.
Right.
You had me at drunk. And I was there drinking and this rabbi walks in, he goes, oh my God, I saw what Jim Jefferies did to you. And I was like, what do you mean? And remember, this was months later. So I had no idea. And I said to him, listen, I haven't seen it, but I'm going to head back home. And I said, just give me 24 hours, trust me. And what I did was I went home and I was shocked. Like, wow, this was even worse than I had imagined. And I went and I basically showed the world how we cut up those answers, exactly those 2 things and the Nazis that he put in there and the disgusting thing, tying me somehow to the Christchurch killer, by the way, who hated Jews.
Is this because he didn't like you and he wanted to persecute you? Or
Look, I don't think it was.
What do you think? It was just good content to make him look
content and destroying my life was just a side thing, and I'm grateful I caught it. And anyways, after that, they didn't remove it.
Anybody listening or watching this, you got to check this video out.
Yeah.
It's on the Rebel News channel, isn't it?
You can find it like probably on my old YouTube videos. Like I don't know, like. If you want to see the platforms that I have, you can go to followavi.com because that's where where you can find the platforms I still have. But just look, probably in my old YouTube videos, it's a few years old now, but you know, the reaction to that was enormous. You know, my video responding to it across platforms got about 100 times the views. This Comedy Central.
How many millions did you get?
Millions, and it went everywhere, and because it was the first time you were able to show, you know, Viacom, which is mainstream media, for what they are. I don't care if you frame it, you know, they framed it as a comedy. It's not funny. And that episode wasn't comedy. It was about the Christchurch massacre.
Do you know what though? That I think obviously with Jim Jefferies. I mean, I don't know Jim Jefferies, but I mean he's squarely to blame for that. And obviously, if he's saying this is my comedy, they're going to just go along with it. So you know, which is shocking really, because you're basically enabling him to fucking throw you under a bus.
Yeah, look, I think he struggled after that. So.
He's not funny anymore.
No, I think also just he lost the comedy show not long after that, and
I mean, in a way, that is for me a positive sign, because that shows Viacom have looked at it and gone, "This is no good."
I'm not going to give Viacom the benefit of the doubt, because they actually ended up calling the FBI on me because they weren't responding to us. They weren't responding to us. They weren't responding to anyone. In fact, they were going on a mass block. Anyone that mentioned it on any of his pages or their pages, they just blocked them on any platform.
Wow.
And it was funny because he did an appearance on Conan O'Brien, you know, soon after, and it was the one platform their team didn't have control of, and you just saw all the comments, like literally, this interview got millions of hits, and every single comment was, "Jim Jefferies, you dog, we know what you did." And so it was, and for years, like for
why did they call the FBI on you?
So yeah, when he refused to apologize or whatever, I said, all right, you know what, I'm going to go to America and I'm going to confront him at Viacom. And when I landed in LAX, the FBI were waiting for me. So I was taken to a side room, and these two FBI agents introduced themselves. And they said, you know, they started, it was really weird. It was after flying from Australia is, you know, a bit of a trip. And I get there and I was like, wow. They started reading to me the local two-party consent laws around filming. And I was like, what are they talking about? And then it just clicked. I'm like, do you think I'm filming? Like, do you think I have a hidden camera on me? And this is after they searched me about 5 times. I'm like, what do you think I am, the Mossad? Anyways, they were all right. They ended up clearing me, but they went to every extent to try stop me and stop this story, you know, growing. And they were protected by the mainstream media, but all alternative media jumped on it. It was a great opportunity for people. And then I got the satisfaction, because he didn't answer it. He didn't talk about it until about probably a year ago. You know, he has this sad little podcast now where he went on this whole rant. And it was funny because you could see finally.
If you reached out to him to go on as a guest.
Yeah. No. So in his rant, he basically said, because I put up, because his argument was, he was trying to say that, you know, it was essentially exactly what I was saying. They didn't, you know, and that because I put up on my Patreon the entire unedited, like, because when I did the response, I showed just the segments where he asked a question, he pasted an answer, and then I showed the actual unedited, the question and answer, and it was completely different. And then I also said, if you guys want to watch the entire hour or hour and a half, whatever it was, you can jump on my Patreon, become a patron for, like, back then for like $2 or whatever, and he was mocking me. Oh, you got like, I don't know, I can't remember how many patrons I had. I didn't really care. It wasn't the point. It was anyone that really wants to fact check me. Well, you know, go and pay for my work. So he mocked me, and there was one bit in there that I had to cut, like a minute, that had nothing to do with the rest of the story. It was more about the legality of my personal life in reference to what we were talking about at that time. I couldn't talk about it. Right. So he had this massive rant, and he goes, oh, and, you know, heaps of mainstream media reached out to me, and I sent them the whole unedited, and they realized that Avi's full of it, you know, and Avi posted it on his Patreon, but he cut out a little. He goes, I will have Avi on this show if he publicly posts the whole unedited video on his YouTube without cutting that. And he said it at a time where he knew I couldn't even post it with that, because I'm not going to jail over Jim Jefferies, because that's essentially what it would have put me in jail for putting that irrelevant minute in it. And the funny thing is, he claims he has the whole unedited, so he could post it up.
Yeah.
And also, there's no legal requirement for him to cut that minute in the middle, but he knew that would stop me because I'm not going to go to jail for him. Thirdly, I mocked him and I laughed because I'm like, why do I want to go on your crappy little show? Literally 100 times the people that have watched that episode, that shocking episode, watched our answer to it, watched the truth. If anything, you'd be lucky if I give you a platform to talk, Rizzo. So, and you're the one that lost your job and all that. So good on you.
Yeah.
But yeah, he got what he deserved for it.
Yeah. And you know, I've obviously seen you've been on various marches. There was obviously the anti-Brexit one. Did you ever run in with Nigel Farage as well?
Yeah, so you know that is a funny story
because he lost his Coots bank account, didn't he?
Yeah,
but he got so much publicity over that. I mean, I've met Nigel a couple of times, and I actually went on he did a thing called Talking Pints, and we was chatting about different things, and I found him to be quite funny. I mean, I've never really got to know him that well, but he's also just been signed up for I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of It. So he's going to come to your town, where I think he's going to be eating cow's testicles.
So Nigel Farage. So there's a few things with Nigel. A lot of what Nigel does is good. And there's certainly a place on this. We need people like Nigel Farage. But that doesn't mean he's not a pompous twat.
Right.
Like, I think he's a self-absorbed, thinks he's better than everyone. And through those Tommy protests and all that, you could see it, you know, where he was calling all those people that were marching, what did he call him? Something drunk bullheads or something. I can't remember the exact terminology.
Buffoons?
No, but I think he called them bullheads, but something about drinking, like something about them being drunk, a bunch of a pack of drunks, and you know, and then 10 minutes later doing a photo in a pub with a pint, and it's like, you pompous prick. Right. Like, when it suits you, you can show a pint because you're a man of the people, and then you can just you can class anyone that supports Tommy Robinson as this thug. You know, and I was in those protests, and it was certainly not the way he painted them as. But he was obviously trying to be accepted by the mainstream. So he's like towed this funny line of wanting to be in the cool club. So you have to denounce. The fastest way to doing that is to, distance yourself from this group, even though a lot of that group were the ones that, you know, they were the biggest campaigners for the Brexit and all that stuff. So everything that, but on the other side, like, he does do amazing stuff, and he speaks very well. And I love the way he presents arguments as well. But my run-in with him was, and the thing was, I got invited to his, again, this goes back to the period of time I cringe over those videos because I didn't handle them the way I probably
would have done now.
No way, you know. And also I blame him a little bit for it as well, because I was invited to his show as media back then in Australia, and I went there and I couldn't be bothered listening to Nigel talk about how great Nigel is for an hour and a half. So I went up to the bar at the top because I am a man of the people that gets drunk. And I was getting on the piss with a friend of mine, and then I got a message because I told the guys, tell me when he's finished talking about how great he is and that he's coming to the media thing at the end, and then I'll question him, like I'll do the interview. Anyways, I was half pissed, and I came down and I interviewed him, and I think it was about, you know, radical Islam or whatever, or Islam in general. And he lost it, and he stormed out on me. And in fact, like, the rest of the media, they were all upset with me because he quit all press that night because I triggered him so hard. Wow. So he's pretty fragile on that way. Having said that, you know, I don't actually have an issue with Nigel. I don't know how he feels about me, but I don't have an issue with him. I think he does do good work, and I think that, you know, some of the campaigns that he's run are really important.
Are you going to ensure that you vote for him when he's an I'm a Celebrity, so he eats the kangaroo testicles or the kangaroo penises or whatever it is?
Yes, that's
this one's you know,
this one's
from Avi. and obviously you've been a friend of the left for a while, haven't you?
Yeah, they love me. I do love the left. They are an unlimited source of content.
What because there was a video that I saw again on online where you upset one of these real sort of left wing people and they attacked you. I mean, what I mean, do you sort of look at it more like a game now? So I
think it's fun for me. That's
right.
That's the stuff that I find fun, but it's more than just a game. I think it's important for people to see them for what they are. Not long ago, I attended a protest as media, which was between the far left and the Nazi fringe right. And the funny thing is, so I was hated by both. I was
unwelcome in the middle, really?
by both sides. Yeah, I was like hated by both sides. So the thing is, when I went to the far left, they literally went violent. Like I got smashed over the head with a pole from the left, which are the ones that are fighting for tolerance. Wow. So, you had this bunch of white uni students literally hitting a person of color with a pole, a Jew with a pole, all in the name of multiculturalism and tolerance.
Wow.
And then I went over to the other side and to their credit, the Nazis were a lot nicer.
Wow.
Neo-Nazis. I'm not calling people, I'm talking about people that refer to themselves as, Hitler-loving neo-Nazis. And they engaged in conversation. They got upset that I couldn't put all their Jew-hating stuff on. I had to cut it up. They think I did it to stop, because they were talking so much truth. But really, it's the truth is that you can't. There are certain things you can't put on mainstream platforms. They recorded the whole thing. They had it on their platform. Their audience think they're great for saying to a Jew all the, oldest Jew hate stuff in the book. But for us, it's, if you want to be on mainstream platforms, which I think it's important to still be on mainstream platforms, I don't think you can't have, you can't include that stuff. I wish you could. In fact, I wish you could. It goes back to what we were saying. I wish you could have the Jew hatred stuff in there still so that people could see my whole conversation with these nut jobs. And because I think that the best way to deal with people with bad ideas is to present the good ideas to their face. As soon as they stop you from being able to do that, and I've even had it in the last few weeks, Meta has banned our videos on Instagram and Facebook, has banned our videos showing what Hamas did, the terror attacks that they did, the brutality of them, and the reason they give for it is that it's essentially promoting terrorism or highlight, I forgot the exact word, but as if it's celebrating it just by putting it, and it's like, hold on. I think it's important for the world to see what these monsters did because you won't believe it unless you see it for yourself. And here they are banning it in the name of the victims, which the victims themselves want the world to see it so people know why it is so important to eradicate it. And that's the same thing with these guys. Anyway, so the left, they're so emotional. They often make no sense. Their arguments, they don't know what they're protesting about. So I'll go protest. That's, I'd show that they actually don't know what the hell they're on about.
So you think a lot of people, a little bit like, politics, politicians, I find at the moment are always trying to appeal to everybody.
Yep.
So they don't really have an opinion.
Yep.
And I think that was why back in the day, like if you look at politicians that stood out for me, Boris Johnson, because he was funny. Trump, because it was like he just said whatever came into his head. He wasn't actually asking someone, if I say this, will I upset people? Yeah. Margaret Thatcher, these people were, Winston Churchill, people like this would literally just stand up people, said what they thought. Even Jeremy Corbyn, you know what I mean? He said what he thought, do you know what I mean? And people, lots of people thought he was great, lots of people thought he was nuts, right? But the reality is, I think if you actually are a politician and you actually do have an opinion, I think the voters want to hear that because they want to back somebody that their opinions align with. But I've just found, and I think that's probably something wrong with politics now where nobody really wants to be on the left or the right or in the middle. If this is cool, we're going to talk about that. We don't want to cause any controversy, we don't upset anybody, so we just sit in neutral. And obviously that doesn't progress anything. But with a lot of these marches and a lot of these rallies where, you have a lot of these sort of climate change Just Stop Oil thing. I mean, when you see a lot of that stuff, you do think that that's being driven by the left. But again, as an observer, right? All it does is annoy me. If I'm driving down the road and there's someone lying in the road and I can't get to work or I can't get to the hospital, or my wife's in labour and I can't because somebody's lying in the road, glued themselves to the road, it just annoys me. I don't then think, oh, what's your cause? I want to support it. It just annoys me. So I'm sure lots of people are the same. But I mean, do you think a lot of the stuff that they do you think a lot of the people that go on these marches actually even know what?
They don't. I can tell you they don't, because I go, I've attended protests in the capacity of, all sorts, ones I agree with, ones I disagree with for a number of years now. But when I go to ones like climate change ones, for example, I literally read up, or Black Lives Matter, all the, whatever the popular one of the day is. And I'll go there, and on the way, I'll just spend about 5 minutes thinking of basic questions that I reckon they can't answer. And they can't. And they say the most ridiculous stuff. And I think that that's important. I find it funny. Most of my work I do within banter. Even when I'm talking to somebody that absolutely hates me, I try to engage as much banter as possible, because that's just my personality. I just think that we've got to laugh about everything.
So could you give me the top 3 funniest questions you've asked with the comebacks?
No, it's not. You see, it's not the questions that are funny.
Right.
So you got to watch them. So I'll ask a basic question on the issue that they purport to. They want to tell us how we should run the world, whether it's climate change or Black Lives Matter or even COVID or whatever it is, and I will go in there and ask them something simple. So, for example, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, there was a big protests around the world. It came to Australia, and it was right at the beginning of COVID. It was funny, 2 weeks before that, they were arresting a small group of COVID people for daring to stand up. And then suddenly, 50,000 people were allowed to protest for George Floyd, who was a convicted criminal with a long rap sheet, and his death with the police was at minimum questionable. It wasn't a clean cut thing yet. And in Australia, there was actually, in Minnesota, there was an Australian woman called Justine Damon that was shot dead by the same police force when she called the police because she heard a woman being attacked. And so cops came, and she ended up being shot dead. She was unarmed, had no criminal history. You know what the difference was? Well, firstly, she was not a criminal. She was white. And the cop that shot her was black. Okay. Now, I thought what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this massive Black Lives Matter rally, which was full of it was mostly white. It was mostly white people. And I went there with me. My security is, a Maori. So he's an indigenous New Zealander, big black guy. And then my cameraman, I think, it was probably the cameraman that I have now. So he was Asian. We were more diverse than their whole thing. So it made it really easy at that time to break the ice. And they obviously thought we were there to cover, to promote what they were doing. And so everyone engaged. And I would just say to them, oh, cool. So George Floyd, obviously you're here for George Floyd. Have you heard of Justine Damon? And none of them, not one person they knew who Justine Damon was.
I've never heard of her.
Yeah. But you're not there rallying in Australia for a dude on the other side of the world who was what you claim was murdered by police officers. It's literally and their responses were just ridiculous, and often the banter followed on from that. So the questions were always serious, and then it was okay, so what you're telling me is you don't actually care about the injustice of somebody being killed, or anything, any of it. Even when you talk about black deaths in custody, even some of the most the statistics of it within Australia, I know because I went and studied it, were just hold on a second, but it's not about black deaths in custody, because actually black deaths in custody, just from doing quick research, showed me that yes, there are high black deaths in custody, but actually black deaths out of custody are higher. So you actually live longer if you go to jail, which is a shocking statistic in itself, but it means that you don't know what you're talking about. And you're picking the problems where you can just pin it on colonization, on all this nonsense, and you don't actually know what you're talking about. And it becomes fun because the reason when I say banter is when they show how ignorant they are on the issue that they're trying to tell us that we need to change, and you can do it in a funny way.
Why do you think a lot of these people follow these different things? Do you think it's just because it's the thing to do and people because when I saw the Black Lives Matter marches and I saw the outrage around the world about obviously George Floyd's death, I did actually think at the time it's and when I looked at a lot of these marches, it was a lot of people, there was a lot of black people, but there's a lot of white people, there's a lot of, and I thought they're all coming out and they're supporting this, but I didn't actually know what they were supporting. But I thought it was in outrage to stand with the fact that this guy had been badly treated. But obviously, as it's gone on, then like you said, there's been recently I don't know. There was an expose on, I think, the person in America that was running it, and they'd been like, the money they raised, they were buying houses and they were doing stuff. Yeah. And you sort of think,
and also the cause of death was always, suspicious because it was very high on fentanyl, and so there was a lot clouding it. And I think, like, how did this guy become the hero of the left? But it's just, you see, there's always something. Like right now, it's supporting Hamas. How the hell did that become the popular thing? Supporting terrorism, right? How did that? And you ask yourself that every time something popular. How did the anti-fascists? I know in Australia they did. I don't know if they did here as well. They and because they're meant to be anarchists. How did they during COVID take the position of supporting government authoritarian responses to COVID? They were literally rallying in support of forcing masks, lockdowns. Like, it was the most bizarre thing. But it's like this tribal thing, and it's become. I know how it became. It's because Trump took a certain position. So whatever Trump says, bad orange man, the left, no matter, they're going to go against it. That because whatever Trump says, if Trump says the virus is not that bad, then surely that's a Nazi position.
It's funny, isn't it? It's I mean, a lot of people that watch this probably and listen to this probably won't understand a lot of these issues. Some of them will, but I think what you've said today, Avi, has been really interesting, and I think I think what you've done, if I'm right, is that you've decided basically to challenge everything that's out there, and done some research on it, and said, look, I've done my research on it. This is my opinion on it. Take away what you will, and then let people decide.
Well, the Rebel News tagline is telling the other side of the story. That's literally the tagline. So,
how did that come about? Is that your business? Was that
no? Rebel News is a Canadian company. In fact, Tommy used to work there many years ago. That's, I think, where he became famous. Is some of his altercations with the media. It was while he was working for Rebel.
Because you got the Trump colours on.
Yeah, you're going to get yourself banned. And so the idea is to look at issues and not take the popular narrative or the media's narrative.
So it's not a right wing or a left wing or a middle wing. It's basically, this is what everybody's saying. These are the facts, and then you present it in a way.
Yeah. So I'm not going to deny. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like the BBC. Oh, no, this is a fair and balanced reporting. No, the BBC is a far left wing outlet. They're just dishonest about it. I am proudly a conservative libertarian around there, like between that. Like I'm conservative on some issues and libertarian on other issues. I'm not left wing. I'm far from that. I'm a bit liberal in the classic sense of the word, because I believe in personal freedom, but that's what I think libertarians are. So I'm not going to hide where I'm coming from. I'm not going to pretend like I don't come from that. But I think that that's important, because that is the side of the story not being given a fair go. And that's why I do what I do.
So what's the future for you, Avi? What are you doing now?
Look, I've just spent 3 weeks on the front line the Israel-Hamas thing, and I've spent about a week here, and I'm really excited to get home and
Get some sunshine.
Yeah, well, just be with my family for a bit. It's been a tough, mentally for me. It's been probably some of the toughest time in my life. The only thing that matches this is probably what we were talking about before when I went through what I did with trying to get my kids. So outside of that, this has been a hard few weeks. It started with that horrific terror attack, and then it's followed with the reaction from the world that's just hard to swallow, and it's scary times. But for now, I just want to go home and hug my wife and kids.
Yeah. And when does your book come out?
My book's out.
Oh, well, okay. So it's already out. Okay.
A Rebel from the Start. You can look it up on Amazon or go to rebelfromthestart.com.
And on social and your social media.
Social media. So the easiest way to find me on socials, like I'm on Twitter and Instagram and all, YouTube, but you can go to followavi.com.
Okay.
AVI, followavi.com, and there I list all my socials or our mailing list or
Brilliant.
My book. Actually, you can find the link there as well.
Amazing. I'm just a little bit gutted you didn't bring me a copy. I have to buy one now.
I'm a Jew. I'm going to make a sale where I can.
You're playing to the stereotype now.
I'm going to get in trouble for saying that one. No, I really would have bought one. We've been traveling. I gave the last one to Liam Tufts. You know Tuftsy?
Oh, yeah, he's good.
I love Liam.
He's had a traumatic story, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's a good bloke. I love him. Yeah. So he robbed me for the last one.
All right.
So, yeah.
Don't worry, I'll buy one. I'm not like him. I don't want a freebie. I'll pay for one. But Avi, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Avi.
It's really good to meet you. Obviously, share your stories, your experiences.
I appreciate it.
And wow, it's been really good listening to you and having you on. So thanks.
We covered a lot.
We have. Thanks for tuning in to the Criminal Connection podcast. Avi Yemini, what an interesting guest. Make sure you tune in for next week. We've got another exciting guest.